thank you all for taking the time this afternoon to come into our How to Get Back Home for South Africans stuck abroad. And we definitely have a fantastic story to tell you. One that was filled with frustration, with anxiety, and one that eventually had a positive light at the end of the tunnel for two of our distinguished guests today, which is Gavin Stono, who is the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Singapore, one of our own from the Chamber, and as his vice, have been following his story quite closely over the last 28 weeks in South Africa. That started off as a business trip and ended up as a long stay abroad. And then Marika, who somehow got labored with the responsibility to create groups and get people back home, and in the end, leading a group of people back into South Africa and sort of becoming the ambassador for the how-to part and from a procedural point of view. Today, guys, we're going to be sort of focusing on just introducing you guys to the team, and going through sort of quite a few questions that I'm sure a lot of people are asking. Sorry, let me just make sure that no one can stop their mics. But yeah, we're going to be going through the story, how it happened, how it sort of unfolded, what are the learnings from that process. And I think ultimately the outcome of today is to try and educate people on the procedures and processes involved in getting back home to Singapore, and ultimately some South Africans stuck in Singapore trying to get back home, and the processes involved in that. There will be a Q&A session, so do feel free to put some questions in the chat as we go through, and we'll try and get to some of those questions. If not, if we don't get through to all the questions, then we'll have a formal response to all the attendees in today's session. I think with no more to do, I think let's kick it off. So in terms of just an introduction, many of you will know Gavin, who's our president of the Chamber of Commerce. Gavin's been in Singapore for about 4 years, I think next month, and runs a business back home in South Africa at the same time, and hence he's traveling to and from Singapore. Marika, been here about 3 years, almost the same amount of time as me. Lives with her family here in Singapore, and probably a good thing that she was traveling with her whole family, unlike Gavin, who was away from his family for 28 weeks, which was the full lockdown process. I think, guys, and Gavin and Marika, welcome, and thanks for taking the time out today to speak with us today. I think starting off, guys, I mean, I think, you know, I would want to share your experiences, individual experiences in getting back to Singapore. You know, how the two of you have been instrumental in getting plus minus, I think, about 60 people in total back to Singapore. Not to mention the amount of people that you engaged with in South Africa that were trying to get to other parts of the world. And maybe Marika, you can sorry, Marika. Sorry, Marika, if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about your experience. You know, the group that you started, how things progressed, and what are the challenges you experienced. Maybe just tell us the story. Sorry, Marika, I'll unmute you. Just give me a second to do that.
There we go.
There we go.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so yeah, we started the groups in the beginning of April, if I remember correctly, is where my anxiety got the better of me because I couldn't see a way to get out of South Africa. And I approached Gavin because I knew he had all the connections we needed and just some guidance from him. So we initially started with a group just for Asia because I saw that there was repatriation flights going from Asia to South Africa, but nothing leaving South Africa to Asia. And I just thought to myself, it would be feasible to get people on both legs of the flight. Why can't it be a possibility? So we initially started with a group just for Asia, and just for China, we ended up with 800 people, which was just too much for myself to handle. So we divided the groups into individual countries and made admins for each group. So eventually I just ended up with Singapore, and we were about, I would say at one point about 100 people on the group. About 60 already came back to Singapore, and there's about 20 left. There was even people on our group that wanted to fly via Singapore to New Zealand, Australia, so just didn't see any other choice to get out of South Africa.
That's great. I mean, Gavin, there were a number of parties involved in the process, and maybe you could just tell us a little bit around, who those instrumental parties were and the relationships that you essentially created through the process.
Thanks, Nigel. Firstly, just hi to all the audience from Singapore. Good afternoon to them, and a good morning to all those in South Africa, because I see there's quite a few South Africans in South Africa also dialing in this afternoon. There were a number of obstacles that we had to face, and I think it was a question of understanding what doors to open to be able to get through, to unlock or get past these obstacles. And I think for a lot of those that were part of this journey, and I think firstly going into this is to understand that Marika and mine are we each have our stories. Everybody trying to leave South Africa has a story. Everyone has one of these problems. I mean, there's how many families were stuck in South Africa that didn't have places to stay, that had to rely on family and friends in South Africa to move around during lockdown. So there were so many of these stories out there, so many people trying to get back or having issues in that they could share. So part of the challenges we were facing was, let's start off first from DIRCO and Home Affairs in South Africa. So DIRCO from giving airlines permission to land, Home Affairs initially not allowing South Africans to leave. So if you had a foreign passport, you were allowed to leave. If you had a South African passport, you couldn't. This subsequently opened up when they gave us Home Affairs and gave an umbrella approval to South Africans to leave if you conform to certain requirements, going home to family, you were a permanent resident in another country, those type of things. So that assisted greatly from passing those ones. Then the second big obstacle is obviously now at the same time, besides having flights to land here, was the fact that we needed approval from Singapore. So Ministry of Manpower, or ICA, we needed their approvals to get it. And I mean, at a stage, we had people, guys on our grouping. I think the one guy had something like almost 50 refusals to get back. It was horrendous, and we were just not winning. One of the big things was from my side. I first want to say, Marika, she is the star of this whole thing. She went out of her way. She's really been doing all the hard work, the groundwork. Mine was purely to reach out, to contact. And I think through the chamber, we're fortunate to have these relationships. And I think that's where people realize how valuable the chamber actually comes into being able to interact. I then reached out firstly to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and a big thank you to Mitchell Lee from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who then introduced me through to members of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, Wushi Hong and Melvin Lim. I know Melvin's also on this, he's also dialed in. So from MTR side, if it wasn't for them, I think office would still be stuck there. The other one that went a long way to helping us was Terence Hong from the Singapore High Commission. So coming back, let me first Mitchell, I reached out to Mitchell to say, look, we're having struggles. We're not getting Ministry of Manpower approvals. So he then put together a group and introduced us back into Ministry of Trade and Industry. As a chamber, we have been engaging with MTI previously, but we never had there was never a relationship built. Since then, through this, now we have built this relationship with Melvin and Hushi, and they were instrumental. I mean, we would email them, or Marika would WhatsApp them straight away. They would come back. They would then do support for us through to Ministry of Manpower. And once this process started, everybody started getting their approvals. So pretty much going back to say, you know, if it wasn't for MTR's involvement and for supporting us, I think half of us would still be stuck there. Going then to Singapore High Commission through Terence, what he did was he reached out to me to say there was a repatriation flight. This was before we even knew we were at that stage looking at charter flights, and he came back and says, Singapore arranged a repatriation flight. There's a lot of Singaporeans on. Do we have South Africans who wanted to come back? And straight away I said, of course. He gave me the contact for Emirates, and that's when we started looking at other airlines, and other airlines started coming through. But at the same time, he was assisting us from their side with South African Department of Home Affairs approvals and transit visas where we needed. And he was constantly engaging with us to see how he could help us. And I really, you know, take my hat off to him and say thank you to those guys for stepping up and really being there for us, answering our calls at various hours of the night, because obviously with time differences. And that's what made the difference. And even now, we're busy with a grouping from South Africa, or South Africans that are stuck in Singapore wanting to go back to South Africa. We're still having MTR's involvement, looking at from swab tests to what else they can assist us with. So yeah, you know, great support from their side.
That's great, Gav. I mean, you know, it was quite a story for you in terms of the initial, you know, shock that you couldn't get back to your family, and you know, having your family here for 4 months without you. So I can imagine it was quite a frustrating time. But we're glad to have you back. Marika, you also found out you were pregnant halfway through this process, right? Oh wait, I think you're muted again. I'll unmute you. Sorry.
Yeah, so that was we were very happy, but it was a bit of a shock, and all the anxiety from the flights didn't help.
I can imagine. So, I mean, I think, Marika, if you could just, you know, clarify how many are still there, how many did actually get back out of the community that you established in South Africa?
Okay, so we managed to get around 60 already back to Singapore. There's another 10 that will be departing in the next week or so. And then there's about 20 still left in South Africa that we know of. They're probably basically waiting for Singapore Air either to open up flights between SA and Singapore, or they are still uncertain of whether it's possible even to come back for them on a personal level. So yeah, the 20 that's still remaining is still just seeing how they can get back, and if it's work related, and if they can do everything.
It's quite strange. And I don't know if it's just coincidence, but my house back in South Africa, I actually Airbnb my house in South Africa, and I had a request today for a couple that is coming back to Singapore on the repatriation flight next week. So it was quite a coincidence that we were having this discussion at the same time. Marika, maybe you can explain, and I mean, I think all of us in the room today, whether we're in South Africa or we're Singapore, we all have a lot of sort of pent-up demand to travel, and all of us, I suppose, including myself and my family, are thinking about going back to South Africa in December. And I think a lot of the audience in the room today are probably having the same questions around, okay, well, what if we do? You know, if we want to go back in December, what is the process? What is the procedure? Is there risk? You know, what does it cost? And I mean, I know, Gavin, you will probably come in here and just explain from a costing point of view, what that was all about, which is quite scary if you think about coming back to Singapore and having to fit another bill just to sort of come back home. So Marika, maybe you can just lead the discussion a bit around, you know, what are those procedures, and what is needed from a criteria point of view for people.
Okay, so first of all, if there's South Africans in Singapore wanting to go back to South Africa, I would caution them to think about this very clearly. And there's not a lot of flights available. There's a limit. At the moment, there's Emirates, which is not a viable option because you need to do a COVID test, which is not allowed in Singapore if you don't have any symptoms. So that's completely out of the question for Emirates. So then your next option is Qatar, which doesn't have a lot of flights available. And your next option is going via Europe with KLM, which is costly because from KLM's side, you have to buy a ticket from from Singapore to Amsterdam, and then another ticket from Amsterdam to South Africa. So it's really very costly to do that. At least Qatar, it's one ticket for from Singapore to Qatar, from Qatar to South Africa. And I must also say the layovers are extremely long. It's like a 20-hour layover at whichever way you fly, UK, Europe or Qatar. But if you do manage to get a flight, which will be great, you need your DIRCO approval before you can fly. So that's where Gavin and I come in, where we will send you a Google sheet that we can fill in. We've asked the High Commission if we can assist him with this whole process. And yeah, you'll have to get your approval from them before you can even board the flights. If you get your approval from DIRCO, that would be great. Then you will have to go either into self-quarantine in South Africa for 10 days, or if they don't approve your self-quarantine, then you'll have to do 10 days quarantine at a dedicated facility there in South Africa. So that then you can have your holiday or your business trip, whatever, in South Africa. And then I would say it's more difficult to get back to South Africa than from South Africa to Singapore. Singapore, even if before you leave, I would say try and get your MOM approval before you leave, because now there's given more lead time for your approvals. But even that is difficult because the repatriation flights only get released 2 weeks in advance. So even though you can apply for your MOM approval 30 days in advance, you don't know when the flight will be back to Singapore. So you might just end up being stuck in in South Africa with a ticket you can't do anything with because the repatriation flights are non-refundable. So if you don't fly on your specific date, you lose the ticket. So unless there's commercial flights for South Africa at the moment, they said it will only open in January 2021. And I read this morning, for example, Qantas said they will only open for Australia July 2021. So I think, to be more realistic, it will only be July 2021 for leisure travel and commercial flights. Currently,
it's quite amazing because when Gavin was in South Africa, I sent him a little screenshot of Flight Trader. I'm sure a lot of people in this group use the Flight Trader app. And there was one flight flying into South Africa, just coincidentally, when I was on my app and I was looking at it. And it was a Singapore Airlines flight. And it was flying in at the scheduled time that it flies in every week. And I was saying to Gavin, get on the plane. It's coming in. Gav, do you want to give us some background on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. So I actually saw that the exact plane sitting on the tarmac, passenger plane, and was wondering, we've got a Singapore Airlines flight here, but we can't get on it. So what had actually happened was I started engaging with Singapore Airlines, and I was eventually started speaking to Marilyn Lewis, who is the CEO of Singapore Airlines in South Africa. And they've been using passenger planes to do cargo deliveries to South Africa, but were unable to get permission through Department of Home Affairs or DIRCO to do repatriation flights. I think it went a lot around certain requirements that Singapore Airlines wanted, and DIRCO weren't allowing them, wouldn't budge to give them those approvals. So hence, Singapore Airlines are still not doing repatriation flights. They wanted to. Every time I spoke to Marilyn that, and basically said, Singapore Airlines really want to do it, but they're just not getting approval. I think also saying that, right in the beginning, and Marika will bear me out here with, we had a lot of charter, well, not a lot, there was a few charter flights. The only problem was with the charter flights became expensive because it comes down to numbers. And then we had Qatar starting, and then Emirates came aboard. But if you look at the flights, I mean, I'll give you an example, a bit of a frustration we had. So my grouping, I think we were on one of the second or third Emirates repatriation flights to leave. And obviously Emirates needed DIRCO approval, so we had to first wait for DIRCO approval for Emirates flights before we could then get to be able to book ourselves on that flight. And we were talking directly to Emirates. So Emirates said to us, they will let us know exactly for our group. We had a group of around almost 15 that wanted to be on my flight. And it was one of those where as soon as we open up, we let you know, you put through, Marika was sitting here in Singapore already waiting with the spreadsheet of the names. And it was on a Monday. And I got called, okay, we've got approval, send your list. Straight away, Marika sent our list. We all did our applications to Emirates. And what would need to be would now be the booking. I think it was by Wednesday, we still had no answers from Emirates. We were saying, but guys, I suddenly got a phone call from Emirates saying, but you guys will be waitlisted. You and the South African Chamber group will all be waitlisted. I went back to Emirates and said, but guys, you promised us. I mean, straight away when you let us know, you said we would be on. And that's how quickly those flights were booking up. So come Monday, as soon as it opened up, through the travel agents, everybody else, those flights were straight away. We're totally booked up. I then spoke to the manager of Emirates South Africa. He obviously saw what he could do. By Thursday morning, he had got all of us on the flight. And from there, obviously, then it just became a question of making sure we got our MOM approvals.
But that sounded like quite a process, and I'm sure it's probably one of the areas that probably could improve as a collaboration between South Africa and Singapore, I suppose, in terms of MOM approvals to and from. But Gav, I mean, do you want to just give us, I mean, I'm interested to know, like, what were the costs involved? Like, how much was a flight? I mean, I can get one for $600, right? Return. What was the flights? How much did you have to pay to come back? Where were you put? And I remember a photo of you arriving, and you sent me, your family was on the other side of the glass. You couldn't even see them when you walked in, but maybe talk us through the costs involved in that process.
Sure. Thanks. So I think the initial costs, with the charter flights, they were expensive. I think it was around 25,000 Rand. But those initial charter flights were to Malaysia. Then you still had to book into a hotel because there was no transit flights immediately. You had to go, I think it was the next day. So then you had to book another flight from Malaysia back to Singapore. Once Emirates started flying, they were probably the cheapest at around 14,000 Rand. We had other flights, KLM were flying, but one leg would cost you 20,000 Rand, long layover, then you still had to book a second leg. There were some hectic costs that were coming through that people were talking about. I think Turkish Airlines, it was Air France, but
yeah, Air was there at once.
Yeah, I think there was some. From the pricing schedules and then getting here, by the time I got back, you had to pay for your own quarantine at $2,000. Well, most of the companies would pay, but they would then claim it back from yourselves as well as the testing. So, there's quite a few costs involved. But I think a lot of people understand the costs. It was more about uncertainty. Especially when we were stuck in South Africa, not knowing when can you get home, when will you get home. What is happening? And that's that uncertainty that killed everyone.
I just want to add to that uncertainty. For in our case, like Evan said, the Emirates flights gets released and fills up so quickly that you literally had to book your ticket without having MOM approval. And that's a gamble we had to take. I mean, we're a family of 3, so my husband was very reluctant to make that payment. But we had to. That's either you do that, and his approval initially was rejected from MOM because of a technical error. So there, my daughter and I got approved, and he was still. We said, okay, we'll fly without him. Like, what do we do? Otherwise, we lose that money. And on number 99, his approval came through, and thank God we all 3 of us could fly. But that's a lot of stress to take on. I mean, Gavin was in a similar position. We also number 99 received his approval. It's a lot of money that you have to basically gamble on and just pray that everything works and goes through.
Yeah. And I mean, so Marika, you've set up some groups. You've set up some groups on WhatsApp. Is that correct? And are there multiple groups? Maybe just explain.
Yeah. So currently we've got a group from South Africa to Singapore to assist the guys there. And then we've got one from Singapore to South Africa as well. We just started that. As soon as Gavin and I came back to Singapore, everybody started phoning us saying, please help us. And we just phoned Gavin. I said, why don't we just start the group and try and see what we can do from this side again?
Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of one individual that actually we're helping to co-sponsor to get back to South Africa. How many people are actually stuck here?
Currently, we only have 20 on our list. It's a very new group, so we're still trying to get. So if people want to join, please contact us. We can add you to the group and help with your stress levels.
And guys, just for everybody on the call today, all of these resources in terms of the documents that need to be completed, as well as information around what you need, who you need to make contact with, etc., are all on the South African Chamber of Commerce website in Singapore, and that's just sacham.sg, and you can download some of those resources and just follow the links in terms of the information we've got. And then ultimately we can put you in touch with Marika, who has put her hand up to do this, which I find quite amazing, Marika, in the fact that you're sort of doing it out of just helping people and sort of their power in numbers, which I think is quite admirable on your side. Guys, last question, and then we'll get into some Q&As from the group. There's a couple of questions that have come through. I think, Gavin, maybe just starting with you, positives that have come out of this, and maybe gaps that need to be looked at, opportunities that have come out of the problem. You know, they always say a crisis is the best place for opportunities, and don't let a crisis go to waste. And I don't think you guys have. Maybe Gavin, you can just start off and tell us some of the opportunities that have come out from this, and maybe some of the networks that you've developed.
I think, yeah, like we say, opportunity had a crisis, but I think going back, I think the biggest thing for us, and especially from a chamber perspective, was the networking. Had it not been that we were pushed into doing the networking, I wouldn't have built up such a good and strong relationship, be it with Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Singapore Chamber of Commerce, and since then we've solidified our relationship with the chamber and NTI. And I think that has been probably one of the big positives that have come out of this. So, yeah, I think taking from that, I think the other one would be, was realizing, and Marika touched on it before, how vital it is to engage with trusted travel agents. And here when I say trusted, because I think there's a lot of fly-by-nights out there. So if you have a contact or connection with a good travel agent, they become invaluable, because a lot of them have block bookings on these flights, and if you're trying to do it yourself, you're going to fall short. I think this is where a lot of the relationships come up. I had a good friend of mine who's a travel agent in South Africa who was feeding me a lot of information and helping me, I would say, when I was getting info, just verifying the info I was getting. And I think that it helps. You know, being able to go back with verified information to your grouping.
Cool. Marika, on your side, positives that came through this?
I want to add to what Gavin just said, with the
Right.
verification from the travel agents and what you also said, Nigel, there's flights available on all these booking apps, cheap flights or what, it's all available, but it's not proper repatriation flights. So people go and book those flights, and then you 2-3 days before your departure date, the flight gets cancelled. So you'll sit there with either no refund, or you will have to wait 6 months for your refund if you ever do get it. So yeah, that's what comes in. Verify your flight before you pay.
Yeah, I've experienced that myself. We meant to go back in July and the flight was cancelled, but at least Singapore Airlines put some money aside, right?
Yeah.
Any positives, Marika, from you?
It was such an amazing experience, and I said it. Out of the 60 or 80 people on our group, I've never met any one of them before, besides my 2 friends that were stuck with us on that side as well. It was amazing for me to see how everybody united together and had the same goal, just to get back. And the power of our community just coming together, it was amazing for me to experience. And the trust people put into each other they didn't know me from a bar of soap. I mean, it was just amazing to see that there's still people that trust people in this world. Everybody went through exactly the same. They know the emotions you went through. Everybody supported each other. It was just such an amazing feeling to be part of this. It was a new family we created. It was amazing.
That's fantastic, man. So some questions that are coming through, guys, and I think we've answered a few of them. So Howard has asked a question. My wife and I are repatriating in mid-December. Can we just book flights and just leave it? Or is it more complicated? And I think you've probably answered that one.
It's more complicated unless commercial flights open up very soon. No, don't book anything now. It won't. I've spoken to Sing Air a week ago, and they said probably the flights between South Africa and Sing Air will open in November 2021, but I'm not putting any money on it because it's the same story we've been receiving every month. We asked them when will they fly again, and then they just push the start dates a month out. So no.
Did they say November 2021 or 2020?
2020, sorry.
I think you've just given everybody a heart attack, Marika.
Sorry, guys. That's the story they've been giving since March. I think and from South African point, they said only January 2021. So please don't now.
And Jenny's asked a question, and again, I think you've answered it, but what is the difference between a repatriation flight and a commercial flight?
So a commercial flight is anybody can book, and you don't need approval to travel on it. Repatriation flight is where you physically ask the government, I want to return back to my home country, and you need approval for those things. On a commercial flight, I can literally just buy a ticket online, get on the plane and fly home. From this one, you need to have your permission, otherwise you can't even board the flights. And it's flights have special permission to land in South Africa. They can't just land in South Africa. They need home affairs approval to land. Otherwise, the flight gets around mid.
And you can only book a repatriation flight through the airline. Is that correct?
There is travel agents that are allowed to book it through. I would personally use a travel agent because they know more than we've. From an airline perspective, they just see numbers. Just someone that wants to buy a ticket and they buy a ticket. That's why Gavin said get a reputable travel agent that's also not just after your money. Airlines will say just book the ticket, and they don't have all the know-how about each country. What's what do I require to enter, for example, Qatar? What do I need to transit in Qatar? What permissions do I need to enter South Africa? Where the travel agents and Gavin and I have already spoken to a lot of parties involved, and we can help you with those questions as well.
Cool. And I'm sure you've created some good partnerships out of that with some travel agents as well. And just you guys wouldn't happen to know if Joburg is the only destination, or can you book a flight would you get repatriated to Cape Town or Durban or any of the other internationals?
Most of the flights only go to Johannesburg, and currently there is a few flights from Qatar and KLM, but it's 1 or 2 flights. There's not a lot. So they're just repatriating to Johannesburg. Hopefully they will open up more flights to Cape Town, but for now it's just 2 or 3 flights that's going there.
Got some questions around dependent passes coming through here. So my dad is currently trying to get to Singapore from South Africa to be with my mom. And my dad has a dependent pass in Singapore. What do we need to consider and what are the options?
If his dependent pass is valid, he can be repatriated. He just needs to apply for MIM approval, get on an approved repatriation flight, and he can come in. He will obviously have to serve his 2 weeks SHN in a dedicated hotel. But if you've got a valid, let me just check here. I can see everybody that's got a valid pass for Singapore can enter Singapore. Singapore doesn't issue any short-term visit pass at the moment while we're on this topic. So yeah, if you've got a valid pass, you can apply to MIM, and once it's approved, you can fly.
So you can't just pitch up here as a tourist. Yeah. There's a few questions coming through here, and guys, keep them coming. They're all very valid. Going home for Christmas, what is that out of the question? And I suppose that's not an answer you can give, but how long does MOM approval generally take to get through?
If we go through our channel that we use for MTI, which has been amazing help from us, then it takes about 3 days for them to submit their motivation to MOM. And then an MOM application, if you submitted it before 12 p.m. in the afternoon, you will get an answer before the end of business day. If you submitted it after 12 p.m., it will take another day just to get your feedback. But your MIM approval is only valid for 14 days.
Right, so you have to get back before the 14 days.
3 days, sorry. So if I apply on the 1st, to enter on the 1st of December, for example, in Singapore, it will only be valid for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd December. Thereafter, I have to reapply. So
Wow.
that's why it's really tough, because there's not a lot of flights available, and if you don't know exactly when your return date will be, you will probably get your MIM approval will not be valid anymore.
One question here. There's a Facebook group, apparently, Home Away from Home. Roy says they seem to be quite active and quite helpful. Do you know about them, Marika?
So they are the big drive behind everything. It was started initially to get those stranded all over the world, stranded to get back to South Africa. And they arranged a lot of repatriation flights through their connections and the government connections that they had. And then they had like a spin-off group for those locked in South Africa, which was obviously us. So that you've got the Home Away from Home group, and then you've got the Lisa group, Locked in SA group. So Lisa has been helping. The main admin there is Eileen. She's been of instrumental help verifying flights for me and giving what flights is available, and then we verified with travel agents. So yeah, those two groups are the lead groups for repatriation anywhere in the world.
Fantastic. Got one here, and I think a lot of people might be thinking this, especially people that have left it to the last minute. What happens if my passport expires? Most airlines don't allow me to travel. If passport expires in 6 months' time, is there enough, is there not enough pages in the passport? What are the backup options for any passport issues? So Gav, I mean, I know you're quite close to the High Commission. What would you say to that?
Let's just talk on passports. At the moment, the High Commission does receive applications for new passports. They only do it on Monday and Wednesdays. So they open at 9:30 to 1:30 on Mondays and Wednesdays. The problem is with the new passport, the submission of the application will take between 6 to 8 months, because it has to be sent back to South Africa to Home Affairs. There's a DHL bag that goes between. So if it's a new passport you're looking for, I know people that are sitting now for 12 months, over 12 months waiting for passports. It's a long process. But if your passport does expire and you need an emergency travel certificate, It can be issued by the High Commission. The application for the certificate must be made at least 5 days prior to the date of departure. And remember, all it is a certificate allowing you to travel back to South Africa. That's all. So once you're back in South Africa, you're going to have to go through the process of then obtaining a new passport.
Cool. Question here, how long does it take DIRCO to approve your re-entry back into South Africa?
And we had one this week. She submitted her documents on Monday, and by Thursday she had her approval.
Okay,
She
so
followed the process to us, so Gavin was able to follow up and assist the High Commissioner with the documents, because the information gets sent to the High Commissioner and they give the DIRCO approval letter. So yeah, she completed the info and Gavin followed up for her and she received it on Thursday.
That's great. So, I mean, this probably feeds the next question. When and at what stage do you start applying for the DIRCO for back home in South Africa? So, you know, if I'm leaving on a flight XYZ or want to, you know, when do I start applying there?
So we can register you on our form and just register you with the High Commissioner at the moment. And then as soon as you've got your physical flight, that it's booked, then we can get, we can ask for the official DIRCO letter to get back to South Africa. To Singapore, yeah, to South Africa.
Good. I've got another one here, because I mean, this one's really quite relevant to most of us here in Singapore. We're all on EPs and probably here for work purposes, etc. I mean, what happens if someone loses their job? How much time do they have to stay in Singapore for, to either find another job or get another EP? Or when do they need to leave the country? I mean, typically that's within a couple of weeks, I think, and typically, but in this case, Marika, how does that work?
As soon as your long-term pass expires, it will be converted to a short-term visitor's pass, which is usually valid for 30 days. You can then, if your 30 days expires, you can apply for an extension with ICA. Firstly, apply online. And in the comments section, you can explain to ICA what happened, your EP or DP expired or whatever long-term pass you've got expired, and just tell them your story there. If you get rejected online, your second step will be to physically go to the ICA offices and complete a form there. You will then you don't have to make an appointment to go, but it is advisable to go there at 8 a.m. because to beat the long queues. Then take along all your supporting documents saying that there is no possible flight to South Africa. There is, or a letter from the High Commissioner saying that there's no repatriation flight physically from the South African government. You will then receive a ticket number, get interviewed by an officer on site. He will ask you a lot of questions on why you think you need your extension. And then based on the answers you give him, you will on site approve your application or deny for the extension, and he will also give you the time frame that it's been extended to. It's either 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And yeah, that's just a process you keep on following, extension after extension. If you don't get an extension anymore, your last resort will be to approach the High Commissioner and ask them for assistance.
Right. And actually, two of the same questions here, so it must be something of concern. How long is the SA approval for DIRCO valid for? So what are the conditions to get the approval to get onto a repatriation flight?
Sure. We've only done one, so I'm going to talk under correction here. We have had to give them the physical date that the person wants to re-enter. So on the form, I just want to get it here, sorry. The date of entry is on your DIRCO approval form. So I assume it will be the same as your MOM approval, that it's only valid for the day that you applied for. And it can be easily, for I saw, because initially the date on the form was incorrect and the lady just responded to say, sorry, the date's incorrect, can you please update it? And it was updated within 10 minutes. Okay. So as long as you're registered with them, it shouldn't be that hard to move. If your flight gets moved or there's a long layover somewhere or any technical issues, it shouldn't be that hard to get it changed on the form.
Cool. I mean, looks like the questions have slowed down a bit, so I think we're getting through them nicely. And that was the whole purpose of this webinar, guys, was to really, you know, collaborate and get some answers for everybody in the community. I think one of the last questions that have come through is how will the chamber assist going forward? and Gavin, I mean, I think you'll answer this, but I think this has strengthened the ties between, I mean, we've already started quite a big collaboration with SAISG, which is South Africans in Singapore, the social arm of the community. And I mean, I think this just brings it closer, Gav. I'm sure you agree with me in the fact that that's the case.
Yeah, I think right from the onset, when we formed the South African Chamber, it was always been there. One of our missions was to close the gap between South African business, South Africans in Singapore, and government, albeit the High Commission in Singapore, South African High Commission. And I think this is just shown how we do it as well, in that, yeah, we can be the bridge between those that are trying to get through to the High Commission or trying to get assistance. We are there to assist. We can help you get the answers you're looking for or get where you need to go. So we're pretty much there as a bridge for those South Africans that need it, or the South African businesses with the High Commission or South African government if need be.
Good. And I think probably, yeah, we've got one more, which I'm actually quite interested to find out myself. So is there an option, when you go back to South Africa, do you have to quarantine?
Yes. They changed their quarantine date now. It was initially 14 days and now it's down to 10 days. You can apply for self-quarantine at your home, but you have to apply for it before you depart your country. So obviously Singapore. Right. If that gets approved, then you can self-quarantine at your house. And there's also a time limit on it. You can only self-quarantine if you are within 3 hours traveling distance from the airport. Or if you have, you can also self-quarantine if you have like a layover at Tambo and you need to fly to Cape Town the next day. But it's only on those two conditions. If you don't get your approval to self-quarantine, you will be met at the airport by officials and you will be taken into a dedicated facility like Singapore, like a hotel, and if you at a dedicated facility, you can get a private lab to come and do your COVID testing there. I think around day 5 you can do that. If it tests negative, then you can apply to leave your quarantine facility.
That's quite interesting. And self-quarantine here in Singapore, I actually don't know the answer to that. Can you self-quarantine here?
Based on, you have to apply for that as well, but it's getting more difficult. So when we applied, they had a dedicated site for that. You can only apply on medical reasons. So for example, on my case, it was because I was pregnant, or other serious medical examples. You have to submit all your supporting documents on why you want to serve your SHN at home. And we never received feedback from them. So we had to go into the hotel for one night and then phone the SHN hotline, and then our application was approved. But now it seems more tricky. You have to apply through MOM if you're a dependent or an EP. You have to send your supporting documents through to them. And even though the system has changed, I think it will still be easier to submit your documents before you travel to Singapore, but it's going to be easier to do it once you are in Singapore. You will spend your first night at the dedicated hotel and then phone the SHN hotline and apply through that.
Right, good point. And in South Africa, just to clarify, do you have to pay in South Africa for your quarantine, just like you would pay here, like Gavin did?
I'm speaking under correction again, but so as far as I know, no, you don't have to pay for it.
Oh, wow. That's quite interesting. Good. I think that is about it in terms of the questions. Just in terms of, so I think, guys, we'll wrap it up. And just for everybody on the call today, again, the resources will all be on our website. You can go and check out the resources that Marika have put together in collaboration with all the different stakeholders in the mix, together with Gavin. The WhatsApp groups will be there as well, I think. So you can, obviously join the WhatsApp groups or whatever it may be if you need to, and have colleagues, friends, people in your community that need the assistance of Marika or Gavin in the process as well.
From the
Sorry.
WhatsApp, I just want to jump in there. Sorry, the WhatsApp groups, we can answer all your questions there. I also post the approved repatriation flights that I know of. So it might be worth your while just to join, and that's where we get your detail for your DIRCA approvals, and even on the South Africa to Singapore side, if you need assistance with the MOM, that's where we get all your information from. So it might really be beneficial if you join the groups to get the accurate information on repatriation flights and the processes. Yeah,
I'm sure. I mean, I think it's just that understanding what's going on and how it consistently dynamically changes week to week and month to month, etc.
Even the documents on the website, the processes change every week. So any updates on process changes will be given on the WhatsApp groups.
Great. Finally, thanks Gavin, Marika, thanks for coming into the informative session. I think we've answered a lot of questions. Guys, if I haven't got to all of the questions, we will download them and send a reply in a sequence with the recording. So if you didn't get everything, we will send the recording on a campaign that will go out probably tomorrow. Do join us for our next upcoming event. Tickets close on Monday for our virtual wine tasting and support of the South African wine industry. We're trying to do our bit. It's a little bit more expensive to support the wine industry in Singapore than it is in South Africa, but we try to do our bit, and we've got some great wines. We've got some great talkers from Boschendal in Cape Town. So please join us for that. You can find that on our website as well as an email that's probably been sent to you today. And just catch up with us on our personal channels. We did some interviews recently with Kevin in the travel industry, Fiona from African Marketplace, which was also a great interview, understanding how business is driven in Singapore, SME, really enlightening, as well as some interviews with our High Commissioner in South Africa, in Singapore, and some really other good content that we're trying to put together over the next period. Please connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, not Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and catch us on our website as well. And from everyone here, thank you very much for joining us today. Gavin, Marika, thanks for joining us, guys. And that's it from us.
Bye. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everybody.